Just do it! Don't let your dreams be dreams. Yesterday, you said tomorrow, so just do it! Make your dreams come true! Just do it!
Welcome to Successful Dropout. This podcast is for the outliers, the innovators, the rebels, those that dare to dream and act on their dreams. I'm your host, Kylan Ginger. Join me as we find out what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed. How's it going, everybody? I've got some pretty exciting news. If you listen to the podcast much, you know we've been building a pretty vibrant community of truly extraordinary people who have committed to an unconventional route through life. The Successful Dropout audience has been growing a lot, and I get a lot of people reaching out to me now with all sorts of questions regarding education, dropping out, opting out, entrepreneurship, resources, networking, etc. So much so that I decided it was time to create a more accessible community on Facebook so that we can all ask and answer these kinds of questions together, as well as celebrate our successes and encourage each other during inevitable adversity. So I've created a closed Facebook group, and I want to invite you to join it. If you follow Successful Dropout, if you resonate with our philosophy and want to help me grow this thriving community, go to successfuldropout.com/group. This community is for the rebels, the outliers, the innovators, the doers, and those who dare to dream and act on their dreams. If you're a dropout, an opt-out, if you're thinking about doing one of those things, if you're a parent, even if you aren't any of those things and you graduated school, I want to invite you to join. All that matters is that you resonate with the Successful Dropout philosophy and that you enter the group with the intention to provide value to the other members and not just receive value yourself. Again, go to successfuldropout.com/group to request admission. Once you're a part of the group, introduce yourself and get involved, and I'll see you there. What is up, Successful Dropouts? Get stoked because today on the show we have Zach Coppinger. Zach is a full-time entrepreneur and real estate investor. Since 2013, he has bought and sold over 120 properties. Holy cow, that's awesome. He invests primarily in single-family residential properties. He does some fix and flips, but his primary focus is long-term buy and hold properties. He started his company 3 years ago and has built a strong team of contractors, bankers, private lenders, attorneys, tile companies, you name it, to continue to grow his portfolio. He thinks single-family real estate is the greatest asset class to invest, but we haven't talked about Bitcoin yet. So, but all jokes aside, the greatest asset class to invest, and I do agree with that, and is an asset class accessible to anyone to invest, and that the barriers to entry are very low. So we're going to learn more about that. Zach, I'm excited to have you on the show, man. I'm glad we were finally able to make it work out. You were a contact that I got from a childhood friend of mine, Stephen Ullman, who has been on the show before. And just happy to have you here, man. I know you're really busy and just out there killing it, which is why we're having to do the interview from in your car, on your phone. So I apologize to people listening if the quality gets a little sketchy sometimes, but this is the time that we could figure out to make this interview work. So with that, Zach, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, my name is Zach. I'm a real estate investor in Dallas, Texas. I did not drop out. I graduated from Texas A&M University in 2011, but didn't take the conventional route out of college, where you get a corporate level job and work your way from the 9 to 5. I actually did an internship at one of the Big Four accounting firms my junior summer at Ernst & Young. And, you'd show up to the office in downtown around 7. You'd work on a tax credit that Obama rolled out. And we had to facilitate that tax credit to all the clients for Ernst & Young. And it was just cold calling clients and asking questions and just sitting at a desk doing that all day was not my cup of tea. I didn't enjoy it. And after that summer, I'd always had an eye for wanting to own my own business. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I owned a little landscaping company in high school where I mowed yards. I liked kind of controlling my own schedule a little bit. But I didn't know what that looked like owning a business out of college. My dad would always make fun of me because he would ask what I wanted to do, and I would say I want to make good money and not work much. And he kept saying, well, there's no family business for you to live in, so that's kind of an oxymoron to say, make good money and not work much. But I, in college at Texas A&M, I went because my education was provided for. I was blessed to have a college education provided for me. If it was not provided, I would have really had to have thought, is this a wise use of taking out loans and saddling myself with nearly 6 figures of debt, to get a degree?
Yeah.
I was blessed not to have to make that decision. But the college, I was a good student in high school. College was a little bit different. As we spoke about a little bit earlier, sitting in a business law class, reading a 600-page textbook and just spitting out information on a test was not easy for me, and it wasn't intriguing. I didn't enjoy it, and my grades really suffered because of it. I didn't find that overly applicable at the time. As I look back on it, it was actually extremely applicable for what I'm doing now, but it wasn't the most applicable at the time, and I just wasn't very interested in it. And I didn't really get a lot out of college until I was in my upper level management classes. And we actually had some entrepreneurs come into those upper level entrepreneurial and management classes that spoke to us about what they did and how they got there. And one of the guys was actually a real estate investor. He owned about 800 houses, and he'd been doing it for about 30 years. And he spoke about the benefits of investing in real estate, and they kind of registered with me. It made a lot of sense. And I actually still keep up with him to this day. He's a good sounding board. He's a bit of a mentor and someone that's experienced all of the kind of road bumps that I'm experiencing growing a business myself. And it's a huge asset to have someone that's actually charted the course ahead of you, and you're able to bounce ideas off of them.
So he became somewhat of a mentor to you.
Yeah, and someone, another person that I knew that I met from one of those entrepreneurial classes, he said, if you get a person that you want to be a mentor to you, or someone that you want to ask ideas for, he said, be sure that person is only an idea person. And I didn't understand what that meant, so I sought him out and asked him, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, if you find a mentor that's ahead of you, they're probably going to have money. They're going to have connections. They're going to have a lot more to offer than just information. But whenever you kind of use that relationship for more than information, it kind of confuses the motive. So, whenever I call up that friend in College Station, he knows I'm not calling him to ask for money. He knows I'm not calling to ask for any favors. I'm calling just for information. And it makes the relationship a little bit different. Because a lot of people do ask for money, and then that kind of whether it's a good
like a business partnership and not a mentorship.
And then if you do borrow money, then there's different expectations, right? It's if for some reason a deal goes south and you have to default on it, well, not only did you ruin a relationship, but you also lost a mentor. So it's I try to keep some of those things separate, and that was a good advice that I got was, if you find yourself a mentor, use them, not actually use them, but use that relationship for information. Don't try to suck more out of it, because the information's invaluable. If your options are, okay, we'll chart the course myself and spend 3 or 4 years learning it, or go to someone that's already charted the course and ask them how they did it, and then put your own spin on it, you can cut so much time out of the equation. So I'm still young. I'm 28 years old. But one thing that I've realized is, man, time is money. Time is valuable. And if you can cut time out of the equation, time's the only thing that we can't buy. It's you can't create more of it. You've got a certain amount of time here to do things, and you got to make your best use of that time.
Yeah.
So
love it, man. Yeah. Absolutely. So going back again, so you went to college, it was mostly provided for, so you got to avoid the debt. I think that's fantastic. We advise people here on the show that if you have an opportunity like that, it might be worth looking into. Abby Sager, who was just on the show this last week, sort of the same situation. She was going to school but not working up a bunch of debt. And so, that's something that it could be a good option. School, earning a diploma, college, it's like a tool. But then you went on to Ernst & Young, which I know for a fact that Ernst & Young in recent years, they've actually relaxed some of their requirements on, required degrees and certifications and stuff for people coming to work with them. For anybody who's interested, they can Google that. It's pretty interesting to see a really well-established firm like that sort of dropping some of their requirements. Then what happened after that? You decided it sounds like you were tracked for the corporate life, and that just didn't appeal to you.
Yeah. So
what was that decision process like?
I don't know if I was tracked for the corporate life, but it just made sense, right? You graduate with a 4-year degree, then you go get into the corporate life, and you get married, you have kids, and next thing you know, 30 years has passed and you're retiring. But I wanted to test the waters. So my junior year, that summer, I did intern at Ernst & Young, and the answer was very clear after that internship that wasn't what I wanted to do. So I actually, I spoke about how that guest speaker came in and talked about real estate investing, and I was interested. But that wasn't the first thing I did out of college. The first thing I did out of college was actually in fast food franchising. I knew a guy that owned about 80 or 90 fast food franchises, and he was an entrepreneur, and he did very well, and I was interested in that. So I went and worked for him for about 1.5 years, 2 years total, and realized that the food industry was not what I wanted to be in. It was very low margins. It was, the food industry never sleeps. You're always working, even on holidays, and you're relying upon minimum wage labor to provide a product, and it was very difficult. And I didn't see a future in that work. I just didn't think that was a long-term option for me. And I was living in actually Huntsville and College Station at the time while I worked for him. And then I ended up transitioning back to Dallas. And I came here, started networking, talked to people that knew people. Everything that I've ever been able to accomplish has not been through a resume. My resume is not one that stands out. So I'm not going to compete with the 4.0 student that came out with all these accolades and all these groups he was involved in and leadership organizations. That wasn't how I was going to ever obtain a job. I was going to obtain a job by just sitting down, talking to someone face to face, and letting them know how I could benefit their organization. Those small entrepreneurial environments, they're not overly corporate. You don't sit down and they've got 3 chairs for 4 interviewees, and they see who's going to go get another chair. It's nothing like that, right? You sit down, you say, look, you've got a small business with 10 people. I want to learn, how can I benefit you? And those were the environments that I excelled in, because I was just, I enjoyed talking to people, getting to know people. And I was very ambitious to accomplish something. So I came back to Dallas and networked, and a friend of mine talked to a friend that he knew and hooked me up with a guy that bought investment properties. And I beat that guy's door down. I called him, left him voicemails, Facebook messages, you name it, and he wouldn't respond to me. He was really, really busy, and I finally got a response from him one day, and he said, "Why don't you come to my office? We'll see what I can." Yeah, we'll get to know you a little bit and see where it goes.
What are the kinds of things you were saying to him?
Hey, my friend, so-and-so, told me about you. And that person gave me a warm handoff too. It wasn't like I was an unknown. Yeah. It was, hey, we've got this friend of ours that's young, wanting a job, wanting to network with people within real estate. And
Right.
I wasn't even necessarily asking for a job. I just wanted to network with people within real estate and just see what doors might open. I didn't go in, hey, give me a job, whatever you got, I'll take it. It was, hey, just want to get my foot in the door with someone that knows real estate and knows, some players in the industry, and just see where that may take me. And
So how many times do you think you reached out to him total?
over the course of 2 or 3 weeks, probably 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, persistence pays off. Either they get so annoyed they tell you, shut up, leave me alone, or they finally go, man, if he's this persistent about just getting a hold of me, maybe he'll be a really good employee. Maybe he'll be really persistent with whatever
I'm curious,
he does.
have you ever had that happen where somebody's just told you to shut up and leave you alone?
Or
leave me alone?
Not in such rude words.
Right.
But I think a big part of things is you've got to pay attention to people's reactions and just kind of feel the climate of the relationship. And if you feel like people are a little bit overwhelmed, then I think you back off a little bit. But yeah, most people aren't blunt enough to say, even if they mean it, hey, don't shut up, don't talk to me. But
but I want to touch on that for a second, because I can't tell you like countless times that I have reached out multiple times in a row, just to the point of like I'm even annoyed at how many times I'm reaching out to various people in multiple different industries and businesses we've been involved in. There's always this, I feel like maybe people listening, there's sort of this perception like you can bother somebody too much and like they might come back and I guess bite your head off or just never want anything to do with you because you are so persistent. But I've never actually had that happen to me. As long as you're polite, you're also sort of coming at it from a, how can I provide you value perspective. And even just, there's been people I've sent literally like, there's actually a guy right now, I can look back at this email thread and we started talking for a bit and then he sort of dropped off. I've sent him like 10 emails in a row and most of them just say, hey, just following up, like smiley face. And I can't tell you how many times I've done that. And eventually I'll send a couple that say at least like, hey, if I'm bothering you too much, just let me know. No hard feelings, zero pressure. Like I just need to know to stop, being so persistent. And it's usually around that time that they actually get back to me. But I feel like there's this fear there that you are annoying somebody or that because you're being persistent and you keep following up, they're just sort of going to continue to, I don't know, they're just going to want nothing to do with you. But I found it's actually quite the opposite if you just keep pushing and trying.
Yeah, I think it's all how you address and approach it as well. If you're getting really fed up, you're like, dude, what's your problem? I've emailed you 7 times, you won't respond. That's going to elicit a different response. But
absolutely, you got to be polite, But even I have even thrown in some humor in there. Like I've taken screenshots a couple times of my face, just like smiling, my face. I'll send that in an email and just be like, hey, checking up, and like this stuff, like they'll get back to me, And of course, I only resort to that after maybe the 10th or 12th time I've tried to get a hold of them, but. I've always, and whenever I've asked somebody sort of candidly afterwards, like, hey, was it too much? Did I annoy you? I've always gotten a positive response like, no, 9 times out of 10, it's like, I was just really, really busy and I didn't have time to focus on you and, and stuff like that. So for anybody listening, I would just say that persistence can really pay off. Don't think that just 1, 2 emails or phone calls is enough. If they're not getting back to you, be polite, but keep at it.
Yeah, my motto with what I do with work is wait until you get a no. So a non-response is not a no. Totally. A non-response is either it got pushed on the back burner, I was too busy, I didn't get the call. Wait till you get a no. And depending upon the no, maybe even wait a little bit longer. If it's a hard no, definite no, sorry, don't waste your time, that's different. If it's if you fill out the no and you think maybe it's just not the right time, maybe revisit it. You just have to kind of have your finger on the climate of the relationship. But I think people give up a little bit too easy.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. But I didn't want to take you off track, man. You were saying that this guy finally got back to you, said, hey, come in, let's chat. And from there, what happened?
Yeah, that was interesting. I went to his office and I met him and he was really busy. He was juggling 100 things, and he sat me down at his office and talked to me for maybe 5 minutes out of the first hour. And the rest of my time was spent just talking to the rest of his staff, being patient, sitting there. And I was there for maybe a total of an hour and 30 minutes, and didn't talk to him very long at all. And I don't know if he was intentionally testing me. I had no clue at the time. I just thought he was super busy, which I think he was. But he was testing my patience, because in my line of business, our motto is hurry up and wait. You have to have all of your stuff done, but you just sit there and wait on other people before you can complete and finish. And we negotiate directly with home sellers, and oftentimes we sit at the dining room table, and you sit there for as long as it takes for them to feel comfortable. And he was testing me. I sat there for an hour and a half, didn't get, visibly frustrated. I knew he was busy, and I wanted some of his time. And I left with a job offer. He said, "You know what? You've been extremely patient. If you can sit there and watch me work for an hour and a half, you can sit at a table and shoot the breeze with someone for as long as they need to." So I left with a job offer to buy houses for him. And that was the best segue into real estate investing, because I basically got to learn it while using his money, in his guidance. He engaged in a lot of things besides real estate investing, or a lot of different areas of real estate investing besides just buying houses. So I didn't get to learn from him as much as I wanted to, because he wasn't in the office a ton. So a lot of what I learned was kind of just reading, kind of asking a lot of questions. I would ask any investor that I found questions. And I kind of carved my own path, and eventually it got to a point where I couldn't continue to grow personally and work for him. I was kind of capped with my potential working for somebody else. So I ended up going out on my own. Well, to be more frank, he actually ended up firing me because I asked too many questions and I was too ambitious. I said, you know the areas that I want to get to, and is that possible for me to get there with you? And he said, I don't think so. And then he kind of locked me out of the company systems and told me to go find somewhere else to work. So that's when it's more like he just didn't have room for you where you wanted to grow to. Yeah, there wasn't
room for you to grow in his company. Yeah.
Right, there wasn't room, and that is a problem with small businesses. Is there's not these VP, these presidential, there's not these CEO levels that you can get to within a small business organization. So if you want to get there, it's probably starting up your own business, unless you want to go work for a larger corporation. Right. So I always knew I wanted to be on my own with real estate investing. I just didn't know when the timing was right. And he told me when the timing was right because he fired me. And actually, he and I still cultivate a very strong relationship. I'm good friends with him. I still ask him questions. We get together, we network. So it took a year for that relationship to cool off a bit, but it's come full circle, and he's a great asset for me to have. So. Yeah, I think people get their feelings hurt in business a little bit too much, business and personal. It's just some things need to happen, and you got to handle it with a little bit of maturity. He kind of thrust me into the circle of starting my own business, and I was lucky to be engaged but not married. I had no kids, did not have a wife yet, and I wasn't saddled with school debt. But I kept wondering, is this the right time? Is this the right time for me to start a business? And I looked forward and said, well, when would be a better time than today? I'm only going to get more responsibility every day for the rest of my life until I retire. I'm going to be married within 6 months. I'm sure my wife's going to want to have kids in the near future. We'll get a house. We'll start having more and more responsibility. So I thought there was no better time than right then. So just kind of dove in, and my then fiance, now wife, was very supportive of me kind of taking that risk, because you're going from a guaranteed check to nothing. You eat what you kill. So it can be a little, as a male, for me being the provider for the family, it can be a little stressful, a little uneasy. But here we are, I think 3 years later, and we're doing extremely well. And I'm actually really happy I got fired. Because I don't know when I would have taken that step myself.
How long did you work with that individual?
About a year. And one thing that I did before I went to work for him, I said, hey, my goal is not to be your lifelong employee. My goal is to benefit you, help your organization grow, but I'm going to learn while I'm at it. I'm going to learn everything that I can. Mm-hmm. So I used every opportunity that I could to learn what he did for marketing, who he borrowed money from, what networks he used for title companies to close properties, contractors. I soaked up every piece of information that I could. I didn't go snooping through his documents. I just looked at the clues that were around, and I introduced myself to anybody that came into the office. And, I utilized whatever resources I had at my disposal. And that was a big, that helped me a lot whenever I started out on my own as well. I didn't start from ground zero. I had contacts, I had relationships. Absolutely, and it all started with that initial job within the industry.
Yeah. I think that's a great point to make for people listening. If you do have some sort of interest, say it's in real estate, or say it's I know there's a few of you that are interested in the restaurant industry, stuff like that. A route that Zach took could be very viable for you, is to try to take a job at a place where you can have that steady paycheck, you can pay down on debt, pay your bills, get a roof over your head. But at the same time, to be incredibly diligent and ambitious about learning the ins and outs of the business, not just putting in your 40 hours and going home, but really putting in the time to learn all the ins and outs, make connections. And then once you actually are at the point where you feel confident enough to start your own business, you do have sort of this head start, as Zach was saying. It's something he did, something I've done, and it works. That works really well. So Zach, what are you doing right now then? So, explain your business to us a bit. What exactly do you do in real estate? There's a lot. I know we have a lot of listeners who are interested in real estate, and then one of our more popular episodes, and a guy we've had on the show twice now, is Ross Alex, and he also does real estate in Texas over there. Seems like a really neat place to get involved in that market.
Yeah, so if I go on tangent, stop me. There's a lot of reasons why I invest in real estate, and that's kind of a broad term, so I'll narrow it. I invest in single family properties. And
for people who don't know what that is, let's
it's a house,
that a bit. Yeah.
A house that a family's going to live in. Yeah, residential. So, single family means it's not an apartment complex. It's not a fourplex or a triplex or a duplex. Just single family houses. Although I will do a duplex or a triplex, but I don't do apartment complexes. The reason I don't do apartment complexes right now is because the need for the amount of capital you need to get into that business is much larger than it is for single family real estate or just residential houses. And
have you ever thought about searching for like any sort of owner contract or wraparound like solution or anything like that?
I do wraparounds within the single family space, but the amount of institutional money within multifamily in Dallas, Fort Worth, and Texas in general is just so unreal.
Can kind of push you out.
Oh yeah, it squeezes out any creative options because if I'm trying to do this interesting wraparound transaction where I'm trying to pay the owner out his equity, but then a Japanese hedge fund comes in and offers to buy it on a 4 cap. I'm just they look at me like you're an idiot. Why would I waste my time with you? So there's just so much money flooding the market that the multifamilies are just really hard to buy. Doesn't mean they're impossible, but to get creative, most multifamily owners don't find themselves in this market in predicament circumstances or in interesting predicaments or poor circumstances the way that single family homeowners do. Sometimes homeowners, they get behind on bills. They have an issue with the house that they can't fix and it gets in worse condition and they have no option but to sell. The typical apartment complex owner is not a mom and pop. It's usually a company or a hedge fund or a REIT or something. So
they've got some resources.
They've got resources and they're more established. So I do want to branch into multifamily in the future, but just right now it's single family. And there's multiple. Whenever we analyze a deal within single family space or residential space, we want to make sure we've got multiple exit strategies. So, we like to do a lot of rental properties. So I'll buy any rental property that I can. That's my long-term goal. They call it passive income, through rental properties. And despite that term passive, it can still be a very hands-on
Right.
business. It can be very
Absolutely.
it can be very active. But it was described to me in my entrepreneurship class. Real estate, residential real estate is like an alligator mouth. If you were to draw an alligator mouth on the board, you've got the top of the mouth is appreciation that continues to go up and up and up into perpetuity. So you buy an asset today with a value of $120,000, and average inflation appreciation is 3.5% per year. Do the math over 30 years, your asset has over doubled in value, just from an equity and perspective. And then the lower part of the mouth is debt. So your debt, if you choose to leverage your asset, which is borrowing money to buy it, that debt gets paid down over the course of that loan, which could be 15, 20, or 30 years, and then that flatlines. But your appreciation never flatlines. As long as the market continues, there may be 3 or 4 year periods where values don't appreciate and actually depreciate. But if you look over time since conception of housing, prices have gone up over the long term. So appreciation continues.
They say it's some sort of saying like, don't have any debt besides debt that others are paying off. And that's sort of the beauty of real estate rentals.
Correct. So, a lot of people just phrase it as, well, I've got a mortgage, but somebody else is paying it. Then you actually hope that you actually cash flow on top of that as well, where you've got, if your mortgage payment's $1,500, you'd hope to make $1,800 or $2,000, to where you've got a spread in there where you're actually making money on top of it. A lot of people say cash is king. We say cash flow is king. I won't do any deal where I don't cash flow. And the equity, I require equity. So if it's worth 120, I want to have some paper money in there. I want to have some equity where maybe my basis in the property is 85 or 90 or whatever it may be. So I've got equity, I've got cash flow, and appreciation is just the icing on the cake. That's the you get to reap that as long as you own it. So it's equity increases through appreciation and through debt reduction. So you're killing the coin on all sides with that. So
do you do any house flipping in addition to that, or would that just be one of the exit strategies?
I do some house flipping. So we have to look at the metrics of the house. If the house, typically you're buying the house based on a percentage of the value. So let's say that the house will rent for $2,000 a month, but it'll sell for $450,000. Well, if you're buying off of a percentage of the value, to be competitive with other bidders on the house, the cash flow on that deal is going to be very, very poor because the rental rates don't correlate highly enough with the value of the asset. So there's a common rule that gets tossed around, which is the 1% rule, saying if a house rents for 1% of its value, it can be a decent rental to look at from a metric standpoint. So if a house will sell for $120,000. If it rents for $1,200 a month, that's a decent deal to look at. So whenever those houses don't match the 1% rule or they're way out of whack, we look at other strategies such as flipping. And we do flip some houses, and I say we flip for food. We flip to put food on the table because rentals are a very slow accumulation of wealth. If you cash flow, after CapEx, after all of your expenses, we cash flow $300 a month on a deal. That's not gonna pay a mortgage. That's not gonna pay personal bills until you build up a portfolio of 150 or 200 of those things. Because as you grow, you start to have to hire more staff, and those people you pay out of that cash flow that you're making.
You got more overhead, yeah.
Yeah. So we flip to put a little bit of food on the table. That's the active income. That's what feeds the family. And it keeps the engine going, right? It keeps us being able to market to find more deals. It pays, the rent. It pays all that stuff. So it's not my favorite thing, and the IRS really hammers you for it. The taxes are
capital gains and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So typically we're in and out of projects for flips, under a year. So we're paying short-term capital gains, which is just your ordinary income tax rate, and the IRS highly incentivizes real estate investing, but they incentivize it holding for the long term, not short term. So the IRS gets their share whenever we flip. I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of my dollars going to the government, so I try to do what I can to.
Likewise, man.
I strictly stay in compliance, but we do a lot of tax planning to try to reduce what our burden is from the IRS. So, tax strategy is a really kind of complex topic, but rental properties, very good way to make money, and the government doesn't tax it the way that they tax active income.
Right.
They're much more polite and kind with the passive income, if you will.
Yeah.
The exit strategies.
Let's go for it.
So the exit strategies that we use are rentals, flips, or owner finance, where we actually sell the house, but we hold the paper. So we hold the mortgage. Those are the three strategies that we typically use.
Okay. So now for anybody who's listening who's interested in getting into real estate, I'd like to sort of get on that topic. Let's start maybe filling people in on some steps they can start to take. And I guess the first question I have to that, most people think that the biggest barrier, which, maybe it is the biggest barrier, but it's a lot, it's not as big as you might think. The biggest barrier to entry is having the cash to actually be able to buy a house. So most people would tend to think if there's a house worth $125,000, you got to have $125,000 in your bank account to buy it. So maybe let's start there and just say, how can somebody who's maybe got, let's say they've got even $5,000 saved up, how can they get into a house and either flip it or rent it? What are some of the steps that they might take?
That's a good question. I will caveat that real quick to say it's going to be hard to start in real estate with $3,000 or $5,000 starting a business. So if you have $3,000 or $5,000, my advice would be to go work for somebody else in the business, learn from them while you make money, and save some up. I started with about 12 or 15, I believe. So it's not like I was light years ahead. I did have enough money to do some marketing. But a lot of people do is they do what's called wholesaling. So they'll go find a distressed property, and they'll contract the property. And let's say that they can talk the seller into selling it to them for $50,000. Well, there's other buyers, say we'll call him Joe Smith, who's an accountant that works 40, 50 hours a week doing accounting, but he wants to go buy rental properties. He just doesn't have the time to go chase down deals and sit at the kitchen table and negotiate them. Joe Smith is willing to pay a higher amount on a house than what you can get it for. You can contract the house, sell your position in that contract to Joe Smith and make a fee without ever having to put forth any money into the deal besides the money it took to find it. Right. And that's very common. I've done a little bit of that myself. And people think, well, am I making $500? That's really slow. To be honest, we've made assignments or wholesale deals into the six figures, so they can be big deals.
Six figures, that's nuts.
Those don't happen all the time. But
I would say so. I've heard of like 5,000, 10,000, even like 30,000 maybe, but six figures, that's awesome. Yeah,
that's not the norm, but I know a lot of people that have done them. They're a big springboard. I know a guy that assigned a commercial transaction this year. His second real estate deal ever, assigned it for $300,000. That's what he made on a deal, and he literally did not know what he was doing. He said he found a guy that said, I want to sell my commercial building. And he goes, great. And he goes, let me contract it. He didn't even know what a commercial contract looked like. He Googled it for like 10 hours, put together a commercial contract, got the deal, and then went and just started talking to everybody at a networking event and said, hey, I've got a commercial deal. Do you want to buy it? Hey, I've got a commercial deal. Do you want to buy it? And some guy bought it and made him $300,000. I don't think,
for people listening, he's making the margin on that. Whatever he got it on under contract for, somebody's willing to pay $300,000 more for that spot.
Yeah. So wholesaling is a good way for people, potentially for people to get into the marketplace without having to expense a lot of capital. You do have to market to find the deals. Some people do what's called driving for dollars. They'll just drive the neighborhoods and look for really dumpy houses and then they'll try to approach the owner and say, hey, are you interested in selling? There's a lot of different ways to market and find deals, but you can wholesale a little bit to build up some capital so you can start to do your own deals. And then you've got a lot of old money. We call it private capital of guys that they don't want to take a lot of risk. They're not interested in playing the stock market because they might be closer to retirement age. And, they've got their money parked in a CD or a T-bill or, low yield bonds, and they're making, they're making 1-2%. And what we do is we offer them a heck of a lot more money. Say, look, I can, what if I told you that I want you to loan me $70,000 on an asset that's worth $100,000, and I'll pay you 9% interest, and it's only for a 12-month term. And your money's backed up by a hard asset being real estate. You have, you hold the collateral. For a lot of those guys, it's a no-brainer. You do have to build up some trust, but that's a far more secure asset than anything in the stock market.
Absolutely.
And it's local and they can see it. So there's a lot of guys that would be interested. We found a couple that loan us money on deals, and we use their money to acquire properties, and then we refinance out with local banks. But yeah, they make the returns they make, they're thrilled with. And it's that's a way, networking. Once again, you just start talking to people. But a lot of the path is wholesaling for people. Some people wholesaling to starting to acquire their own properties, and then using, they call it OPM, other people's money, to make the deals work.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. In fact, my very first deal that I ever did was when all I had was like $3,000 to $5,000. That's why I threw out that number, because what I was able to do is actually, I was able to raise private capital. I had a guy, I convinced him took the money out of his home equity line of credit. And I put together a deal for him. I had a house that was going to auction that I really had my eye on. I got in and checked it out. Actually, the cops had busted down the door to clear it for squatters and stuff, and I kind of came in behind them and saw it was it was really a gem underneath all the crap. And it was going to auction soon, so we put together a deal. It was a little expensive because it was so last minute. So he got, I think it was 30 or 40% of the upside plus 12% on his money. He fronted all the cash to purchase the place and do the capital improvements, and I did all the work pretty much. But we flipped that place, and it was less than 3 months for quite a profit. He was able to take home $18,000 for lending his money out for just a few months, and I was able to take a bit more than that. And so it's definitely possible. And I didn't use one dime of my own money. Again, it's finding the deals, and this doesn't at least the market we were in, where we were, this wouldn't have been possible every single month, but for sure, 1, 2, 3 times a year. And it's what we did to kind of, like you said, keep food on the table for quite some time.
Yeah. Now, one thing I do try to touch on with people, because I was a little naive getting into the business, is I'm sure you'd kind of echo the same thing. Whenever people start talking about profits they're making from flipping houses, if you're flipping a $300,000 asset and your goal is to make $15,000, you're going to be out of money in short order. If you're actually taking the asset down, if your whole profit for the job is projected to be 15, more often than not, things go wrong on a rehab. There has to be some insulation factor, and holding if you have to hold it a little bit longer than you thought, I would just say $15,000 sounds like a lot of money, and it is. I'm not minimizing $15,000. But you've got to be careful when buying houses. You don't make money on the sell. You make money on the buy. You've got to make sure you've got a strong buy point. And 15 sounds like a lot of money, but that can get eaten up so quickly. If you've got electrical issues where you've got knob and tube wire, you have to rewire the house. If you've got old clay pipe plumbing where you have to jackhammer and replace the sewer line, I mean that eats up all of that profit. So
yeah, so I mean, I'll throw in there that my unfair advantage, I guess, is we had a construction like painting company was the first company I ever started. So that we had that knowledge going into it. But I've bought houses where I haven't had the time to go in and like I guess do the inspection myself prior to say they're going to auction or something, and I've paid just contractor friends that I know. I paid one $20 one time. He spent a couple hours there and basically wrote a list of these are all the things that are going to have to happen. These are all the issues to watch out for. Yeah, like you've got clay piping or something that needs to be replaced or bad wiring, bad plumbing somewhere, and then it's not that hard to then go in, measure square footage, get on Home Depot, figure out your pricing. You need to be decent at budgeting and really be careful and just go through all the different line items. How much is this going to actually cost? And then add another 20-30% in there for unknowns and stuff. So you have to be smart about what it's actually going to take, because I would, you say sometimes, or I would say like almost every single time something unexpected happens, you're always spending a little more money than you budgeted for, and so you do have to be careful with that. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how big is your team then? You keep saying like we and they and stuff.
So we work with a lot of subcontractors. We have quite a few houses. My subcontractor list is probably 40. I include them in the we, even though they're not in the office day to day, helping me with the administrative work. And I'm actually a bottleneck right now where I'm trying to get some office admin help. I'm spending too much of my time with compliance stuff, paperwork, making sure that we've got all of our documents organized for the properties. I'm juggling, setting up the refinances to get out of the private money, coordinating with the realtors to sell properties. I'm spending too much of my time doing that, not enough time actually acquiring houses. Acquiring houses is the lifeblood of our business. And if that stops, then everything else kind of ceases to exist behind it. So I'm in the process of trying to get some office admin help. And my wife, she's involved a little bit with the flips. She's very good at design. So, she'll come into the house and say, okay, we need to do this, 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 and this. And it's kind of my job to make it happen with the subcontractors. But she doesn't really get her hand dirty with the subcontractors because they can be a little difficult to deal with sometimes. I'm sure you've got some experience with miscommunication with contractors and subcontractors, and kind of how to navigate those waters while you still keep people invigorated to finish the project. And she just likes picking out colors and fixtures and stuff like that. So that's where we let her involvement be.
Right. So in your opinion, how realistic are the HGTV shows like Flip or Flop and stuff like that? Do you, as somebody who's involved in real estate, do you watch those at all?
My wife loves to watch a couple of them, and I struggle to watch them. They just make me want to throw up. It's so unrealistic. It's really frustrating to watch because everyone's like, you go into someone's house, oh, you're like the HTV guys. You're like, no, like the job is so much more than that. It's, the sounds of it, it makes it look like, okay, you buy the house, you've got an awesome contractor that fixes it up, you encounter maybe an unforeseen electrical issue, and then you hold an open house and you sell it and you move on to the next one. And, half the time, the biggest battle is just getting the house closed. Sometimes title issues can be so messy. Just the seller accepting your offer is just the first part of the equation. Then you've got to actually be able to get insurable title on it. The houses that are distressed often have distressed situations as well, where you've got, the owner's passed away and there's no will, and you've got to go track down heirs, and it can get really messy. So there's a lot more work than just buy the house, fix it. So, there's so much more that goes into it than that.
Yeah. All right, Zach. So I just got a few more questions for you, man, before I let you go. I know we're getting short on time here, but I'd be curious to hear what you would consider to be your worst entrepreneurial moment to date. Tell us that story. I'm sure there's probably been a few failures and lessons learned, mistakes.
Yeah, that's a good question. I was bidding on a house to try to this woman had 4 houses she wanted to sell, and I wanted to earn the right to buy the other 3, but to do so I had to get really aggressive on the first house, and I was bidding against 10 other guys, and I was in a great area, but I was looking at the other 3 houses that she had that I really wanted, and thought, I'll get aggressive on this one so that I can earn the right to buy the other 3. And I got really aggressive. I bought that house. She accepted my offer, and I way overpaid for it. I mean, way overpaid for it. And got my butt handed to me on that house, and then she ended up selling the other 3 houses to somebody else. It didn't turn into the best deal for me. But what I learned from that was, I've translated that principle to other aspects, is don't buy something what it is, not what you think something else could be. If you're talking about real estate, don't buy it for what you think it might be worth 10 years from now. Buy it for what it is today. Make sure it makes sense today. And looking back on that deal that I bought, it did make sense today. And that translated to other aspects of my business. I'm lucky to say that we haven't had a lot of failures. The business has started up. We've seen growth, but that individual mistake that I have translated to buying other houses and kind of learned from it. So I've been lucky not to have any major hiccups that kind of sidelined us.
Yeah, those are valuable though, for sure. Well, last 2 questions here, man. Do you have any parting advice for any of our listeners who are thinking of dropping out? Let's say they're thinking of dropping out of college to be an entrepreneur of some sort, but they haven't quite made that step yet. Just any parting advice?
I think the lure of being an entrepreneur oftentimes is flexibility, and it's almost an oxymoron, because I do have flexibility with my schedule where, if I want to go, do something or need to take time to go to the doctor during the day, I don't have to answer to anybody, but the buck stops with me for everything. So if anything needs to get done, I have to get it done. Just because I don't have to do it at 2:00 doesn't mean it doesn't have to be done by the end of the day. So as an entrepreneur, sometimes people chase I don't want a boss telling me what to do. And I wouldn't change that for the world. I love what I do. I love the friend that I have, but I probably work more than all of my friends. So the lure of being an entrepreneur is not this cush lifestyle where you don't have to, where you stay in your PJs till 10 o'clock and answer the phone. And, it's a grind for everyone. For a business you're trying to start, there's someone else trying to start one and do better than you. So, being a business owner is awesome. I wouldn't trade it. But, don't let the lure of flexibility be the reason that you go, because you may realize that it may not be quite as lush and flexible as you thought it would be. It's going to take a lot of work to build something that's worth building.
Yep. Absolutely. Great advice, man. And how about on the flip side, do you have any parting advice for people who have dropped out and who are already on their entrepreneurial journey?
Already dropped out and on the entrepreneurial journey. Myself, I'm very motivated. I don't need someone to be a cheerleader for me. I don't need someone to be in my corner, but there are times where I get a little worn down. I get, day after day after day where something keeps popping up. And one thing that I had to do to continue growing was actually pull away. So I needed to, take a weekend to go hang out with my wife and my friends and kind of turn things off a little bit and reinvigorate. I noticed myself getting into a bit of a rut because it was just the same thing every day. And I was getting really worn down. So, if you've started the entrepreneurial journey, chart the course and continue to attack it, but don't be afraid to pull away. If you're feeling overwhelmed, pull away for a day, get your bearings and your mindset, and then come back reinvigorated to crush it as soon as you get back. I think a concerted effort to create some sort of independence from your business is important, because if not, it can just consume you. if things keep popping up and you don't let it wait. You and I talked briefly about it. There's a book by the guy from Keller Williams called The One Thing, and I still need to read it. But the premise is, there's one thing you have to accomplish every day. Be sure you accomplish that and realize what can wait. I think that's really good advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it, man. Well, Successful Dropouts, you are the average of the 5 people you hang around the most, and you've been hanging out with Zach and Kylan, learning what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed. For everything we talked about today, head over to successfuldropout.com and type Zach into the search bar, and the show notes will pop right up. And as always, stay hungry, stay foolish. There's a right way to do it.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. We didn't touch much on it. If someone asked me, hey, should I go to college? My answer is it depends. Do you have a plan? A lot of people go to college just because they're told they're supposed to by their high school. If you don't have a plan for your degree, I'd really question whether you should spend that much money and rack yourself up in so much debt to go. There's plenty of entrepreneurs and successful people that just learned, by experience, not by college. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's why I said it was like a tool earlier. You can pick it up, and if it's used for the right task, it can be great. If it's used for the wrong one, it can really just be a pain in the butt. And so So it's crazy. I think with the increased cost of education, there's going to have to be a paradigm shift back to, tradesmen such as welders or plumbers or electricians, or just not even going to college, period. The earnings potential with the degrees aren't paying off for what the debt you have to saddle yourself with. Your return on investment is just plummeting. I mean, all the above, man. I mean, we're really already seeing that. I've been doing this for over a year and a half now, and talked to a lot of people in the space, and this is sort of what we're seeing. Whereas even just 5 years ago, say a podcast like this would be pretty controversial. Now it's becoming even a little bit more mainstream as more and more students are like, hey, wait a second, spending, $85K on a liberal arts degree is not, I'm watching my friends do it, and it's not getting them the kinds of jobs and salaries and lifestyles that they hoped it would. And so maybe there's another way, maybe there's another option. And there absolutely is. I think I think the reasons for actually going to college and earning a degree are they're getting fewer and fewer and fewer. STEM field, if you're going into medicine at all, there's some jobs that still legally require a degree, then, you got to do it. But pretty much anything else, I mean, if you want to work, say, at a startup in maybe some generalist position, like sales or marketing or operations, or you want to do real estate or entrepreneurship, start a business, it's just not necessary, and more people are seeing that.
Yeah, I look at what I'm doing. I think a trained monkey can do what I'm doing. I mean, to be honest, it's not rocket science, right? It's a matter of personality and drive. Right, yeah. So, I still would have gone to college, if I could do it over again. But man, you got to think, nothing that I did in college, or no knowledge that I gained, I wouldn't have been precluded from doing this by not going.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And you say a trained monkey could do what you're doing. I know a lot of people who are not involved in real estate at all. They want to get involved. It can seem very, very complicated, and there's just a lot to do and a lot to figure out. But again, you don't figure it all out at once. Take the first step. I would say, what Zach was saying earlier about wholesaling. I think that's a great first step to get into the space, start learning about what it's like, talking to people in the space, and hopefully earning some cash. And then from there, you just sort of take the next step and the next step. I'm not his biggest fan, but I know Grant Cardone, he sort of has this philosophy where you just commit first and figure it out later. And I know a lot of other people do, but that's always worked well for me. I didn't know how to flip, my first house. I had no idea. Really, I had a little bit of experience with construction. I knew I can fix this, but I don't know about all the paperwork and all the, like, where the money's going to come from and who, how that's all going to work out. But you see an opportunity, commit, and figure it out as you go. We call it just-in-time learning. It tends to work out if you stick with it.
Yeah, I agree with some of the stuff that Cardone says. I caveat what Cardone says, and I say commit and figure it out as long as you're the only one that stands something to lose.
Yeah.
If you can't figure it out and it's going to take somebody else down, that's something you got to think about.
Right, yeah.
So if you've got a family that has to sell their house before they hit foreclosure, and they're counting on you to pull their equity out, and you don't know how you're going to get them there, and you can't accomplish it, but you said you could, and you just cost them a bunch of money because the bank took it because you couldn't get them out in time. That's something you got to think about. You got to think about the consequences of not being able to actually follow through.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You got to be aware of your situation and sort of take into account the risk. It was just my wife and I, and so it was something that was very, very doable. But I do know, say, another individual. He's a father. He's in his I believe 40s or maybe late 40s, mid 40s. And he's got this entrepreneurial mindset, and he's constantly taking these risks and sort of moving from thing to thing before, after it doesn't work out or before it has a chance to even work out. And it's been really tough on their family because at the end of the day, he's not providing. And he has a great mindset. It's just these are things he should have done when he was a lot younger, and if he wants to do them now, it has to be a little bit more calculated and maybe just a little bit less. And so there's a time and a place, absolutely.
And I know, I guess we're off air now, but the one big piece of advice that I would give other entrepreneurs is there's never a better time than now. Mm-hmm. No matter I know we touched on it a little bit, but responsibility gets more and more every day that you live life until you retire. So there's never a better time than now. And if you have to come up with reasons why you shouldn't do something, you're probably not in a place to start a business. Mm-hmm. Good entrepreneurs are people that find reasons to do things, not reasons not to do things. So, there's never a better time than now. Unless, very certain circumstances might not adhere to that, but by and large, there's never a better time, than now to go out and do what you want to do. I
love it, man. Love it. We're putting all that in.
Oh, really? I thought we were done.
No, I mean, it's just, sometimes I've had this happen a lot, actually.